We recognise that with the further deterioration of the economy, it was necessary to be more modest in the aspiration and very specific about the costing.
It is essential that we set specific priorities because, as I've said so many times before, if we promise everything, we get nothing.
Stand by. Stand by music. Ladies and gentlemen, Roy Hattersley, Deputy Leader, Neil Kinnock, Leader of the Labour Party.
The launch of Labour's programme this morning seemed designed to erase the 1983 campaign from memory. The party know their manifesto for the last election was a vote loser. The longest suicide note in history, it was once dubbed. This time, the presentation's much slicker and the commitments much fewer. The new manifesto, which the leaders unveiled, only mentions the word socialism once, against 7 references last time. Top priority goes to jobs, with a commitment to reduce unemployment by 1 million in 2 years. Last time they were committed to a cut of 2 million in a parliament.
We recognise that with the further deterioration of the economy, with the further hardening of unemployment, with the number of long-term unemployed now greater than the total of unemployed in 1979, then it was necessary to be more modest in the aspiration and very specific about the costing.
The key to creating jobs, they say, is regenerating manufacturing industry. They'd introduce a capital repatriation scheme to encourage people to invest in Britain instead of abroad, and set up a British Industrial Investment Bank, which would concentrate on long-term development schemes in Scotland, Wales and the English regions. There are no pledges to nationalise or renationalise industries, with the exception of British Gas and British Telecom, where the government would take more control.
We certainly have a manifesto that is much more definite, much more specific, much more closely argued and costed than the 1983 manifesto. The reason for that is partly because of the way in which I've insisted that we conduct the party in the last 3.5 years. But secondly, it's because we recognise that our country has suffered large economic blows. And in those circumstances, it is essential that we set specific priorities and we are very tough in pursuit of those priorities because, as I've said so many times before, if we promise everything, we get nothing.
Labour say they'll spend an extra £6 billion a year for the first 2 years, raised by restoring this year's twopence cut in income tax, increasing public borrowing by £3 billion, reversing the extra tax cuts which have gone to the richest 5% of the population, and, to the delight of the party's left, introducing a wealth tax. Some economic commentators are saying they'd like more detail.
And they played the Brahms.
We're asked to take on trust the assertion that it would cost net £6 billion a year for the first 2 years, and add in fact considerably less than that, only £3 billion to public borrowing. Well, I don't understand quite why, if it's so carefully costed. We haven't got the figures in there to back up these assertions. And for example, even if you account for the fact that there would not be a privatisation programme, you've got to find £5 billion from somewhere just to start adding up the figures.
Labour accused the government of neglecting the health service. They promised to cut waiting lists. One way to do this, they say, would be to computerise bed allocation. They'd stop privatisation in the NHS too, and begin to reduce prescription charges. They promise more spending on education as well, so that class sizes are smaller and schools have up-to-date books and equipment without having to rely on fundraising for them.
And I don't actually think that, for example, in education, what they say in this about education, although expressing all sorts of well-meaning thoughts, is anything like as specific as the Conservative Manifesto will be. And the question will be how they can sell their brand of concern as against what the Tories will present, which is something a good deal more specific and a good deal more radical, actually, in its institutional suggestions.
On foreign affairs, the commitment to take Britain out of the EEC has been dropped. The manifesto merely commits a Labour government to stand up for British interests within the community. Labour still say, as they did in 1983, that they want a non-nuclear Britain, though there's no timetable for achieving it, and this time the manifesto avoids the word unilateralism.
Our consultation does, at the end of it, require the removal of those weapons, which, as a sovereign country and faithful ally, we can rightly require. But what we're interested in is the practicality of securing the objective of policy and not rhetorical flourishes.
The defence policy, for example, which in 1983 caused such a totally catastrophic result, is more precisely referred to, and in its extreme point of removing the American nuclear bases, unspecific as to the timing of that, leaving plenty of room open for a negotiation with NATO, which will not please the left.
No, if you make any assessment of the huge majority of the Labour Party, and I'm talking about over 95, 97%, there is complete solidarity and support actively and belief in the priorities of policy, the direction of policy, the achievement of policy that we want.
So, doubts about American bases, but no doubts about American campaigning methods. The leader projected as superstar, complete with running mate. Labour have travelled a long way since Michael Foot's day.